Good to go?
Yep.
Okay. I hope everyone can see my presentation. Hello, I am Andrei Cornei, and I will be talking about a migration from a classic application with classic app server and webspeed to a PASOE server. And the name of the presentation is From Classic to PASOE, the hell I'm getting through. And I will start my presentation now. Okay. The agenda is the application that I will talk about that we try to migrate. The first step, the manual configuration, which is more about development environment that we configured. Next step is about script install, which is more about a setup that we executable that we use to run and creates everything for us. And the last one would be about the move to Progress 12, OpenEdge 12. The first part was more about 11.7. As we can see, I'm a tech lead at Wayfare. I have around 15 years experience in Progress. These nice words were actually not written by me. I'm not that narcissist to write something so nice about me. Actually, it was one of the kinders, how I'm used to call all the trainees that I trained up till recently. So I hope this is all true. And now, I forgot to ask for our client approval. And considering the GDPR, I will talk as of one of our clients and their app. There will be no screenshots, only funny GIFs and some gibbering organized in bullet lists. Their app. So as I said, I will talk about the application as their app. The application is in 11.7.5. So first step was to migrate to 11.7 PAS, and afterwards to move to OpenEdge 12. They actually have an older version running on 10.2 Progress, and therefore they use different ports for other than the defaults for each version. They have app servers and webspeed servers. The app servers are used for reports and schedule tasks and integration with different hardware like printers, POS, point of sales, PAS or card readers, and so on. And the webspeed client is actually the client application, which they have in desktop version and web, as they call it, plus mobile. Actually, their desktop is more, they call it desktop, but it's running in browser and it's using an NSIS and a Tomcat. And it's a version used by employees, while the web is used by their customers. Mobile is using the same web speed as the desktop. The app servers are running schedule events, schedule tasks that are stored as a queue in the database. The database itself is a multi-tenant database. And at a certain point, they came with a request to make it possible to have an executable that allows you to create an instance for each different tenant, each defined tenant that they have. Tools that I use, at least for this migration, beside the Progress and the OpenEdge Studio, is Gradle, Jenkins, and the NSIS. NSIS I'm using for writing those Windows installers, and Gradle and Jenkins for building those installers. I won't get into it, but for now, later I will show only the changes, small changes that I did in Gradle so that my local builds work. Okay, so as I mentioned, everything that I will tell now is, at least for the moment, are for 11.7 migration. And then we'll get to the moment when I will speak about OpenEdge 12 path. So about the equation that you can see there, they have two versions of the application, the live and the demo version. Each of these versions have two appservers and two web speeds, plus the database, of course, one database for each version. And the appservers and the web speeds were those that I mentioned before. And what they want to get from this equation, they want to have two PaaS instances, each one with 4 deployed web apps. Each web app corresponds to the app server or the web speed that they had before. Of course, they want their application working, and if not better, then at least the same performance. And there will be some performance testing, but none were done yet. Another thing that they want is to have a generated executable, so a setups.exe, that allows to create a fresh install, so a new environment, in this case with Progress 12, or to upgrade an existing one from 11.7 to Progress 12. And then will come a moment, then they also want to have that option to add the new instance for each tenant that they have, and they can select. Okay, so the first step is the manual labor, as I call it, and it's actually to create an instance, an environment using the management console. So it will be a dev environment. And the small adjustments that I'm doing in some files to have it running. So this was all done for 11.7.5. First thing that I did was to check for some information about moving to PASOE. So I found the white paper. There you have a link in, actually that one is the link for that white paper that you can find on the progress side, and it's about the migration. I read it, not that well, but I did. So this step was done. I then installed 12.2, but this comes with actually when we move into Progress 12, I already had the 11.7 installed because there was the classic environment, so you can skip this one for now. And next step was to just create a new instance, new PaaS instance using OpenEdge management console. So it's an easy peasy task. And give it a name, of course, a location. In my case, it was a local one, so no remote. And the security model, dev, because it's for the development environment. If you don't define a folder for it, it will create it for you in a progress working directory. And of course, you have to define the ports, which are mandatory, the HTTP, HTTPS, and the shutdown. And because I'm lazy and kind of used with these ports, I use 4 8s for the HTTP and 8889 for the HTTPS and 887 for the shutdown. If you don't define a shutdown port, you can use -1 and it will be automatically assigned one. Okay, now that I have my instance created, it's just a plain instance with the root web app in it, and I had to deploy 4 web apps in it with all the right settings and the mapping on the settings. By mapping, I mean the mapping between the old parameter values from the classic and webspeed to the new ones from the PASOE. And then we got some progress suggestions about those settings. So this one is checked too. And the last thing was to copy the code. For the backend, I didn't do anything. I left the code where it is. So it's a PL file that I left where it is and just referenced into the pro path of the web apps. And the only decision that I had to make was to do something about the GUI files, the client ones. So I chose the easiest way and copied the files into the static folder of the concerned web apps. Now that I have my dev environment running, now I can talk about what issues I had and the help that I received further from the progress guys. And yeah, that was this was really the easy part of the migration that we had to do. And then it came the part with that we have to do something automated. And from some time, the words automated and migration give me terrible headaches, but I had to do it. So we moved to the script part, the part that generates a setup that installs everything and does the configuration for you. So for those scripts, we use the NSIS, which is no soft scriptable install system. The only thing that I can remember about NSIS is the nullsoft and that it was created by the Winamp guys. Now I really hate those guys. Before I was hating because having problem with NAMP. Now I hate them because of the NSIS. And why is that? Well, it's because there is a few documentation on that part, on that scripting language, and a lot of things that usual developers are not used to. It's the way you work with variables and the functions and the section and the flow of the scripting language, how it goes, but you get used to it and the job is get done. So more or less I'm using NSIS to run actually to run Windows commands, so commands to execute some pro tools or progress or any other things in Windows. As I mentioned, I haven't touched the backend, so even in the script, and the only thing that I'm referencing the path to the library that we have with the code, so the backend is the same. Then we get the moment that we have to make a decision about the GUI code. So we had three options, and as I mentioned, I have chose the easiest one, just copy the code into the static folder of the web apps that concerns me. So for the web speeds, corresponding web speeds, web apps. Okay. Next, the decision to make was how to do it with the properties on the PASOE. So the broker properties that were before for the classic app server and web speed, now OpenEdge properties. In the white paper that I mentioned before, it's mentioned a tool similar to merge prop and is path prop conversion. I assume that didn't work as well for me, and one thing that I still remember what I didn't like about it was the way the prop path looked like, and there were a few things that afterwards I had to change by hand. So obviously that wasn't the desired result. So I moved to using OEprop tool, and that one allows me to query and set the values for every parameter from the PASOE instance. It worked just fine. So I took every setting one by one, checked if they are still valid or not obsolete, and then used that OEprop to add them with the desired values. At a certain moment, after we had everything in place, even after the manual install and after that, we sent the OpenEdge properties files to progress guys, and we got some progress suggestions from them. Okay, so on the GUI part, as I mentioned, we had 3 options. So the current solution that we are using is the copy paste to the static folder. So if my instance is past instance, and the, let's say, webspeed one is the previous webspeed that I had, and let's say I kept the same name. So I would copy all my GUI files in that static folder. I override everything. I'm not deleting anything, and it's working. It's okay. The second option was to work on your server XML file, and that is to define the static directories to your workspace in the server XML file, which you can find in the conf folder. And there inside the host element, we can add the mapping within the static folder and our current GUI location. By current, I mean by the classic one. And the third option is to add symlinks, and for that you use a command prompt, obviously as admin, and from concerned web app location, so where we want to have the reference, we do a make link command to our current, or actually not current, but classic GUI folders. I mentioned 3 options first, but I forgot to mention that there was a 4th one that someone used. I remember these 3 because I wrote them in Confluence. The 4th one was reverse proxy with IIS. So basically, all you have to do is that any traffic that is coming through IIS with a specific prefix on the URL gets directed to the PAS instance. We have asked Progress about this 4th option, and they said that it's a common practice and that is nothing to be concerned of. So it seems that we might take it into consideration also, this one. And the winner is none, and we're not sure which will be because we didn't do yet some performance testing to check which one was the better one. So this will be as a next thing to do for us. Okay, the mapping. As I mentioned, I took the classic settings parameters one by one and added them with the new values from the PASOE. On my first try, what I did, I put all the values that it is possible in Management Console, then checked for the OpenEdge properties and the values field. And then I came into documentation, I came across a mapping table just by luck. You can see the link in there. There's actually a link, and it allowed me to do that mapping. Some of the parameters are obsolete, some are new, but considering that I'm moving from classic, then I use everything that is possible. What is about the app server agent versus app server session manager? I messed a lot these 2 values because some of them are settings for the agent, some are for the session manager. So be aware when you are working with that. And in that table, I think some of them are mistakenly written one to another. So better try it for yourself. And of course, there might be parameters that are not on the list, but actually working. And in this case was binary upload maximum size. And also there can be parameters that are in that list and they are actually working, but you cannot add them. The solution that I got from the progress was just to add a plus right before the value that I'm defined when calling prop, and it worked. One of the issues we got with the new settings and everything in place in there was we were getting enormous log files. And by enormous, I mean we had even more than 1 gigabyte size of the log file. And that was due to the fact that that event, that scheduler appserver that we were using, the one that was running from time to time, was logging a lot of information in there. So we asked for the progress help, and then we got some progress tips. And the first tip was that PASOE doesn't offer rolling log files, and by that they said that the PASOE doesn't roll the log file when it gets to a certain size, like in the classic. The only option is that you get archived at the midnight. So that was a really problem for us. And for the agent log, it wasn't even archiving at the midnight. Their solution, at least for now, was to use in the name the year, month, day, brackets, and automatically it was archived, renamed, and archived in the midnight. Another thing that we got as a tip was to run one agent for application with a large number of sessions per agent. And the reason for that was because PASOE has a multi-session agent. What you are setting as maximum agent is better set as maximum connection per agent, as the best practice is to have each multi-session agent manage as many client connections as possible in order to maximize the scalability benefits. Don't worry, I don't remember this thing. I just read it as you do. The only thing that I remember now is that it's better to have one agent with multiple sessions. So their recommendations for their suggestion for some of the parameters was initial agents 2, minimum agents 2, maximum connections per agents 25 at least, and if there is a high usage, then you can make it even higher, let's say 35. And for the maximum available sessions per agents, it should be at least the same as maximum connections per agents. Another thing that they told us about is not to use the .p in our configuration, like in the startup procedures or shutdown procedures. But that happened only because we sent them the properties files for the dev environment, and there we had the .p instead of .r. Okay, so it came the moment when we have to move to OpenEdge 12, and we hope that everything will work as before. And the first thing to do was to install OpenEdge 12. And before that, we have actually to decide on getting a JDK, a Java, because I'm not sure if you had the chance to try it, but you don't get Java anymore. So we decided on adopt OpenGDK. I hadn't any major issues with the progress update, whether it was a manual configuration or an upgrade. And the script was just running a silent install for the progress with the predefined settings and control codes. Another thing is backup your database, because at some point you get some weird messages, which actually means that you have to do a conversion on your database. As for the database conversion, of course, I did it with the Pro Till, convert 11 to 12. But before that, don't forget to truncate it and be aware that you don't get any messages, or at least I didn't get any messages that something got wrong in the beginning. So I found out that first I wasn't using the right DLC, because there was some mess with in NSIS with reading the registries and assigning the values. Afterwards, I get the message that I'm running the Pro Till from the DLC folder instead of the database, and so on. But everything was okay. I solved them, and the icing on the cake was that I was getting the message the database is in use, even if I tried to kill everything using the task manager or the task kill command. But again, a dbman and stop on that on the admin service solved those issues. So on the Gradle changes, as I mentioned, not many changes I did, so just only for my local bits to work. First, yes, it failed because I was stupid enough to don't look in there, but assigning the right progress and Java versions of the problem, and everything worked as it should. Yeah, I lied about I didn't have any major issues on installing OpenEdge 12. Actually, when I tried to change the defaults for the ports for admin server and pro admin server, the install failed. Not sure why that happened. So for the moment, I stopped messing around with admin server plugins properties and FedFun properties. I left everything at default, and I said that I will get back to see what's happening there. And beside a lot of other small issues that I cannot remember, there is a thing about the auto start, and that you cannot set it that only from the management console. So for now, I decided I think I will go with registering the instance as a Windows service, and I hope that will work. So conclusion. The work is not done yet, so there is still a lot of work to do. But first thing for me to do is to ask for one of our customer consent. So next time maybe I can give you more details and screenshots on their app. Read that documentation, and that's more for me because I lost a lot of precious time experimenting instead of reading the documentation and the thing that I need, and so read that then documentation. Definitely, I will get to the moment when I will ask progress again for the help. So I will give them again that OpenEdge properties and ask for the suggestion. So there will be a progress help SQL. And the thing that will come will be the performance testing, not only for the GUI, but for the settings that we had for the application. That's it for now. Questions?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, first of all. Actually, we do have questions. So how easy is it to find documentation on the subject of migrating? And is the progress documentation helpful at all?
Yeah. So I just went to knowledge base and searched for the PASOE migration. And from that moment on, I followed some links and got the white paper link that I provided in the presentation and the progress documentation, which is a bit confusing and hard to follow, but was still useful. For me to find that mapping it takes me every time around a couple of 5 minutes or more, but now that I have the link, I think it will be easier for me. So it's helpful.
Okay. One other question. What is the time frame in which the migration was done?
Yeah, so it's not done yet, but first, when it wasn't our top priority, we worked for a couple of months, but it wasn't a full time. And the moment the decision was to move to 12 and kind of made it a priority, it took us 2 months. But as I mentioned, we still have some work to do on that. The manual configuration itself, it took us less than a week with testing and the tool. So a couple of days, you can have an environment migrated and tested.
Okay. One final question. Is it possible to get back to classic app server after the migration?
Yeah, I hope so. We haven't moved or uninstalled anything, so everything is there, even the 11.7. I think there might be a problem with the database, which is already converted. But if you have a backup, then I think we can do a workaround for that. And yeah, I think that's all. So it should be possible.
Okay. That's it for the questions. I would say thank you very much for the presentation and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.